Welcome back, everybody. I got another video inspired by Hunter Man again. He wanted me to go over some more of the breeding. This came from, I'm going to call this video inbreeding, line breeding, back crossing, if you want to call it, put it like that. And first I'm going to give some examples with nature. I always use nature as an example. Uh, some species of animals that we used to think, and most people think, well, nature inbreeds a lot. Heavy. It really doesn't. In some cases it does, in some cases not. There's always some inbreeding going on with nature, but not as much as we previously thought. One of the reasons nature can inbreed the way it does is because survival of the fittest. Only the strongest survive, kind of along those lines. Again, I forgot to mention, nothing meant for legal purposes, all history and examples, stuff like that. So I speak of the past a lot. Nature can do that because it only uses the best individuals, the ones that have no flaws. The ones that do have flaws are weeded out. Whatever those flaws are, they don't survive or they're not allowed to breed. That's the way nature does it. So we can use that example in our own breedings to breed along those same lines, right? The less flaws you have, the better chance of not getting them in your breedings. So that's one of the reasons that nature can do it, and we can do it that way also. Because if it's a major flaw, it's going to come out, it's going to screw your breedings up. So my advice is not even try it, regardless of how the dog is bred, how much you like the dog, how the pedigree looks. They have major flaws, meaning they're not healthy, don't have a good immune system, not constitutionally sound, not good structure, not good temperament and behavior. Don't breed them, especially when you're inbreeding, right? One example would be David Devine. We're talking about breeding. I think he mentioned it on my video. If he didn't, I'll mention it here. They use the heavy Cassius Clay blood. They use the Divine's Patty blood, which is daughter of Eli Jr. Champion Bruce stuff, which was which was a son of Patty bred to Boomerang, right? They inbred their dogs, and rather than get spindly leg, weak dogs like a lot of times you get with inbreeding, they got thick boned dogs, well structured dogs. So that would be an example of inbreeding where you don't get those types of flaws. Because a lot of times people think, yeah, inbreeding can cause this and cause that bad things. It does, but in this case, it actually didn't. So something like that, yeah, I'd use those in my breeding programs because they have the structure and soundness that allow you to continue using those individuals in your breeding program, right? There's some wild Mustangs called Kygers. Those are known to be heavily inbred within their particular species, but the way they're managed by humans is you have a herd of Kyger or herds of Kygers in one area and a herd of Kygers in another area, and they're continually crossbreeding those two different herds so that there's not too much inbreeding. All the same type of horses, some relations, and within each herd there's inbreeding, but they also outcross to each other's herd, meaning they'll bring a horse from this herd, bring it to this herd, and a horde from this herd, and bring it to that herd, and crossbreed like that, right? Kodiak bears is another one that's mentioned. They're isolated on the Kodiak Islands. They're an archipelago where that's basically the only place those bears are found, and they've been there for thousands of years. They're the biggest brown bears around as far as I know, and they're known to inbreed as well, but with some differences. And I think the reason they're able to proliferate for so long is because those bears are monogamous, meaning they breed for life, the same two individuals. So those two individuals are the only ones breeding with each other. They're putting the offspring out there. Now, farther down the line, after those offspring come out, there may be some close breedings too, but even those offspring are going to be monogamous. So it cuts out the heavy inbreeding of breeding brother, sister, father, daughter, mother, son. It's more along the lines of cousins and aunts and nephews and uncles to nieces, grandchildren to distant grandfathers, like that. That's how it's able to get away without going extinct, because there's not that heavy inbreeding amongst them because they're monogamous, right? So uh, that's another example, right? Uh, there's less chance of extinction within a population in the wild if the numbers are large, and you see that with prey. There has to be a lot more prey. Prey. There has to be a lot more prey than there are predators, uh, for two reasons. You need a lot more prey so that the species survives, because they're getting eaten and killed off by predators, and you have to have a lot less predators, because if there wasn't enough prey for them to eat, they would starve to death. So again, there's that balance between predator and prey. There's millions of prey compared to maybe hundreds of thousands of predators. That's another way nature does it. I haven't studied too much on the prey itself, but I would assume the same thing. That yeah, there's some inbreeding, but not heavy like people think, because even them, they need to be able to get away, run away, hide, have intelligence and robustness, and be healthy to produce a lot of offsprings. That's another example. Predators, as a general rule, don't have a bunch of offspring within each litter, even if they have 8 to 10 cubs or pups. And lions, they don't have that much. Tigers, they don't have that many offspring, one or two or three. Whereas fowl, they have a lot of them. They produce a lot of eggs over a period of time. Their gestation period is shorter. With chickens, it's 3 weeks. And they can continually have offspring over and over again and produce millions of them, compared to predator that can only produce thousands or tens or hundreds of thousands, but not millions, not that way, right? So if the population is large, it can sustain more inbreeding than if it was small, where the gene pool is more isolated and smaller, which could lead to extinction, or less and less survival of the fittest individuals. But there are some animals that are inbred. I found these examples. Heavily inbred animals would be royale wolves, mountain gorillas, and Indian tigers. Now, I haven't done a lot of research on them. I just mentioned them because there are examples in the wild of animals being inbred. I don't know their situation, how they live, hunt, how they uh, their breeding techniques. All I saw was a quote that these are inbred individual species in the wild, right? Um, Now, to get on to some breeding techniques, I'm going to give this one, and it's a way to produce a heavy inbred line of animals. It's another technique used, and even though I might have mentioned before, I'll try and go on I'm not sure if I did or not, so either I'm repeating myself or just making myself more clear, kind of going a step further with a little bit more explanation. So this particular, just like I did in one of the other videos, this particular method is starting with two individuals that are not related, basically an outcross. So what we have here, I'll just use Red Boy Jeep because that's what I was familiar with, and it's one of the most popular and most successful crosses in the history of the breed. So in this example, you would breed Red Boy to Jeep, whether it's you want them as straight as possible, as pure as possible, if you want to use that word, which I don't like using. But it's a red boy bloodline bred to a Jeep bloodline. That's the first outcross. In the next generation, what you have is it's half red boy, half Jeep. You take something out of that, breed it back to the Jeep side, that would make it 50%, right? Jeep. So you have half red boy, uh, half Jeep, bred back to Jeep, making it 50%. The next generation, which would be quarter red boy, 3/4 Jeep, you breed it back to Jeep. In that generation, you get 73% Jeep. Moving on to the next generation, you would have an 1/8 red boy, 7/8 Jeep, bred back to Jeep. That gives you 87.5% Jeep. One more generation, and I wouldn't go any farther than that if you're looking for purity, right? What you have is now you have 1/16 red boy to 15th 16th red boy, and that gives you 93.75% Jeep. I mean, 1/16 red boy to 15/16 Jeep gives you 93.75% Jeep. That's about as pure as you need to go. And I have another method of how to create a pure bloodline, right? I'm going to put that in my book. I'm not going to talk about it here, but it's just another example of quote unquote how you get purity, or how you get a straight line of dogs, right? So after making these breedings, which is 4 generations, right, you're heavy on the Jeep side. Now you can do that going heavy on the red boy side. It would be the same thing. You take the red boy Jeep 50-50, and then you take from that, it would be 50-50 red boy Jeep, breed that back to the red boy, take something from that, breed it back to the red boy, take something from that, breed it back to the red boy, and then you have the 93.75% red boy. Let's say in a fantasy world you did that, and now you have pure red boy and pure Jeep, right? By crossing them together after those generations, you're repeating what you originally done. And that's how you could keep that original cross going. By putting those two bloodlines together after those generations, you just repeated what you did in the beginning. So that's the original cross. If you want to take that a step further, what you could do, once you make that 50-50 cross again, and you could do it in the beginning, but you're trying to produce pure bloodlines on both sides, or at least on one side. When you put those back together after those breedings, you breed brother and sister from that, in the hopes, like I mentioned before, that you get the influence from both sides. Now, in some of them, you're going to get the influence of one side, of the red boy side, and others you're going to have the influence of the Jeep side, and then some of them are going to have the influence from both sides. Now, let's say you do this. All you do with those two individuals are inbreed them like that. Do those brother-sister breedings over and over. Do it for 3 generations. Within those 3 generations, you're going to have the same thing. You're breeding those same 2 individuals either 3 times in a row or 3 times altogether over a period of years. That's the only way you breed those 2 brother and sister together. You don't breed them to anything else. What that does, it gives you a bunch of dogs over a period of time, bred the same way, that you can use in more inbreeding, you can use in line breeding, or you can use in outcrossing. And you have the variation of some of them are going to take after the red boy side, some of them are going to take after the Jeep side, and some of them are going to take after both sides. So just from those 3 breedings, you have all these different options that you can use with those particular individuals, depending on how you want to go. This time I want to go more to heavy to the red side, red boy side. You breed to that individual that exhibit those traits. I want to go heavy influence on the Jeep side. You breed those individuals that have the influence mostly on the Jeep side. I need both of them again in my stuff in a future breeding. You breed to the ones that show influence from both sides, right? Because when we talk about breeding, people all, they hit me up, which is nothing wrong with it. That's the only way to learn, is to ask, and if I can help, I will. How do I breed my dogs? Which way should I go? Well, this is one example of what you can do. They'll give you varied individuals that are closely related, have some differences, and you can decide which way you want to go with them. So you don't need a lot of breedings. You don't need a lot of dogs. If you stick with a particular direction that you want to go in and you breed along those lines, you only need 1 or 2 breedings here and 1 or 2 breedings there, and move forward, 1 here, 1 there. A couple breed this male 2 or 3 times in his whole life, breed this female 2 or 3 times in her whole life, and you'll always have dogs because you chose the direction that you're going to go in, rather than wondering, what should I do? You have to get to a point where you're not wondering, what should I do, but you're thinking about, what do I want to do? And this is where I'm going to go with it. The only thing that screws that up is if a breeding didn't work, but that happens. So you discard that particular breeding and you move forward with other breedings, right? I'm not saying you should rely only on 2 dogs, but you don't have to rely on several different breedings, outcrosses, or loose line breedings to move forward. It can be the same individuals, bred similar, bred the same, have some crosses in it, and you're moving forward in that direction because you're going to key generally on 2 things: certain individuals and certain bloodlines. So even within this inbreeding example I'm giving here, you're using 2 particular bloodlines, Jeep and Red Boy. You can decide which way you want to go at different times, heavier on the Red Boy, heavier on the Jeep, more even of both, and you're deciding which particular individuals you're going to use to make the breedings you want to make. So you're concentrating on individuals first and their traits, and then you're concentrating on a particular side of or blood that you want to work with, right? So again, if you're going to inbreed, make sure they're as perfect as individuals as you can get, because that's what nature does. And if they have major flaws, do not incorporate them in your family of dogs, because you're going to have more major flaws. For example, let's say you have a real nice dog, well built, good structure, good intelligence, good with people, whatever you consider good, deep chest, thin waist, bred up the yazoo, but he's blind. Again, you have 2 options. Do not include him in your breeding program because he's blind, and he could and probably will throw blind offspring and progeny, or you breed him and you weed out any blind dogs after him forever and ever and ever, and keep all those same other standards: deep chest, thin waist, good bone, big teeth, whatever it is. That's the only way you can deal with the flaw, because honestly, in nature, it would not even deal with that flaw. Something came out blind, it wouldn't last too long. It wouldn't live above, much less above puppyhood or kittenhood or whatever it is. It just cannot survive. So we can manipulate things however we want, and we have, our facilities where we can have a blind individual and have it survive, and it doesn't have to die, or something that has a particular flaw where you can keep it as a pet, and you don't have to put it to sleep or anything like that. But as far as breeding goes, uh, even though we're able to do that, the survivability of a lot of different animals, that we domesticate is longer than they would be in the wild. Even though that's true, we have better medicine, health, and all that food and all that stuff. Uh, you don't have to breed them if it's a major flaw. Where it came from, why it happened, you can do your research and figure out the whys and what fors and all that. But the point is, not every individual is worth breeding, and honestly, most of them aren't. You certainly have a preference from one to the other, and that preference is what makes you distinct as a breeder of your family of dogs. I'm going to give one example here of my breedings towards the end of my time when I got out of the dogs, of kind of how I put my breedings together and how I developed them, which individuals I used, and why. So here's a pedigree of mine. Hopefully you can read this. Kind of rudimentary and crude and all that, but I'll try and get through it. Hopefully you can understand. This is one of the last, if not, I believe it was the last breeding that I made from my family of dogs. These dogs went to OTK, and he got, hold on. That's better. The first one I put, that was the wrong one. But anyways, as I was saying, this is a pedigree of Bulldozer. This is from the last breeding I made. He had a good litter. There were several dogs that were shown in his litter. Bulldozer was a very good dog. So this is probably the last breeding that I did make from my stuff. And it was a big litter. I did artificial insemination. I used 3 cc's and got 11 pups. So that's just, people think the amount of sperm matters. I guess it could, but as long as you get enough of it in there and the female is healthy and fertile and the male is healthy and fertile, it doesn't take much to get large litters. I don't know the science behind small litters and large litters, the comparisons. There may be some, I don't know what it is, but with my breedings, I got variance. I got as little as 2 pups up to, like this one, 11 pups. Generally, the average of mine was 4 to 8 pups, but I had more than one litter where only 2 pups were in it, and I had several that had 6 to 8 pups in them. But this breeding is after several generations of me breeding dogs, which included Louie here up at the top. Louie bred to Sandy, and Louie was a good dog. He wasn't matched, and my advice at the time to OTK, and Sandy was a good female, wasn't matched, but they were looked at, they were shown. I saw Louie go 15 minutes and smash a dog, and I saw him stop a dog in over an hour, or right around the hour mark. Sandy, same thing. She was a proven female, rough, had all those traits I like in a Jeep dog or a Honey Bunch dog. Louie was a better athlete, taller, deeper chest, strong, just a magnificent looking male. And Bulldozer, his son, was too. So what we have here as far as the influence, I started off with Big Red, his sister Miss Rowdy, and Sissy, who was an inbred Jeep female. So in this example, after these generations, you have Big Red's influence here, here, and here. So 3 times his influence is in my family of dogs. Plus, at the bottom here, you have Miss Rowdy, which is his sister. So there's part of that line breeding stuff. With that breeding, you have Bill to Lucy. Bill is off of, it says unknown here, but it's PB's Blondie. She was an inbred Jeep bitch. So you have Big Red being bred to Blondie, and you have Champion Ninja bred to Miss Rowdy here. So, you have Big Red to a heavy Jeep bred bitch, and then you have Ninja, who is a Jeep Rascal male bred to Miss Rowdy. So there's some commonality all the way through there. And relations, close relations, Big Red and Miss Rowdy, brother and sister. And then you have the both the Bow Honey Bunch breedings that produce Jeep, and the Rascal Honey Bunch breedings that produce Rascal Jr. Now back up to the front here, where Louie and Sandy come from. Is Louie is the result of Big Red being bred to Bambi, right? And then you have uh, Sandy is the result of Mr. Rowdy being bred to Champion K. So what we have here is Louie being a son of Big Red here, and then you have Mr. Rowdy being a son of Big Red here. What further clicked it together was you have Bambi and Kay, who are littermate sisters. So you have littermate sisters on both sides of the ped, who were off of Champion Bill and Lucy, and then you have half brothers, meaning Louie is off of Big Red, and then Mr. Rowdy is off of Big Red also. And going down to that, you have another half brother of them, of Bill, being off of Big Red, just like Rowdy is, and just like Louie is. So you have this put together where you have tight breedings, meaning Bambi being bred to Big Red, and Big Red is also her grandsire. On the bottom side, you have Mr. Rowdy, who's off of Big Red, and you have Kay, who's off of Bill, who's off of Big Red. So you have a lot of half brothers, and you have the tightness of Big Red and his sister in there. And it's just a conglomeration of family breeding. Big Red was one of the foundation dogs. He's enough of his influences in there, and I wanted that influence not just for his ability, but his ability to reproduce. So not only was he a good producer, all these dogs that were off of him or related to him were all good producers. And they came from good producers, meaning Jeep, Honey Bunch, and Rascal Jr., which is Rascal and Honey Bunch. Within all that, if you notice, Big Red and Miss Rowdy are half Red Boy. So because she's in there and Big Red is in there more heavily, that influence of Red Boy was always in my dogs. And that's how I kept it in there. And any offspring of Big Red or Miss Rowdy has the influence of Red Boy in it. So that's kind of how I put my breedings together. And as it continued forward, even OTK added some more Ninja Blondie to his stuff, which went along with Bill, because Blondie is the same dam to Bill as the female that OTK used in his breeding programs. He used Little Ivan, who was a dam to Blondie. So Little Ivan and Bill were half brother, half sister. So hope this helps. Like I said, it's kind of rudimentary, but that's how I did my breedings, and I was able to keep it going, because even though all the dogs are related and some heavier than others, there's influences of other dogs, distant related, and even the Red Boy stuff, which is a total outcross that I kept in there to keep it not so tight. And it's an example how you can have tight bred family of dogs that are not inbred, closely related in some fashion, and not related and distant related in other fashions. Hope you enjoyed it. Love to hear your responses. Thanks for all your support.